I'm pleased to welcome Brad O'Connor, the CEO of Cogstate, back to the Morgans Network. Welcome back, Brad.
Thanks, Scott. Good to be here.
Company's had a very strong performance, share price performance over the last 12 months, and just more recently there was a little bit of weakness. I'm just wondering how you've seen the year and what's caused this recent share price weakness.
Yeah, so it's been a great year for us. I mean, I think driven by the strong financial performance. We've grown revenues really strongly over the last couple of years, to be honest, and then converted that for a EBIT profit of just on $1 million for 16 year, and then we've continued beyond that with at least very strong first quarter results. So that's seen some really good share price appreciation. As you mentioned, we've seen that pull back reasonably dramatically over the last couple of weeks, or last week, I suppose. Eli Lilly announced the failure of their phase 3 Alzheimer's disease drug, solanezumab, last week, and that caused some significant weakness in our stock. Not necessarily directly related to what we're doing in terms of impacting our earnings, but nonetheless, I think the negative sentiment has impacted the stock.
It's always worth just refreshing investors and our Morgans Network just what Cogstate does. So perhaps just a minute or two just refreshing on the Cogstate story and technology.
Yeah, so Cogstate's we're a technology company essentially. We provide expertise in the measurement of cognition. So cognition is just how somebody is thinking. Predominantly we sell our technology and then associated services to pharmaceutical companies. So our technology and services are used in clinical drug trials. So our customers are the big pharma companies or the CROs, the contract research organisations that run clinical trials on behalf of the pharma companies. So we've mentioned before, our strong revenue growth. We've currently got over $55 million of contracted revenue backlog that will be recognised in future periods. And that's really built on the back of very strong science, credibility, as well as good technology.
So you've mentioned the strong pipeline at your AGM recently. You noted a strong first quarter with sales contracts in the pipeline. How's that looking?
Yeah, so we signed $28.5 million worth of sales contracts in financial year 16. That was a really good, strong year for us, and on the back of a good financial year 15 as well. I think really encouragingly, we had a stellar first quarter of the 2017 financial year. So as you said at the AGM, we announced that we'd signed over $17 million US of sales contracts in just that first quarter, which puts us in a really strong position in respect of our earnings profile for financial year 17 and then beyond that into financial year 18.
So how does that relate to revenue, if you can just convert those sales contracts?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about this revenue backlog, and what we mean by that is the amount of revenue that will roll off from sales contracts that we have on our books. So in many ways it's similar to something like a mining services company where you sign a contract and then you execute the services under that contract and recognise revenue over a period of time. Our clinical trials can run from anywhere from 9 months to up to as long as 5 years. So when we start the financial year, we have an amount of revenue contracted that we expect to recognise in that financial year. In the 2016 financial year, we began the year with just under $11 million of contracted revenue, and then throughout the year we added another $16 million worth of revenue as a result of signing contracts through the year. For the 17 year, we began the year with $17.5 million worth of contract revenue. So we're at the start of the year up about 60% on where we started the previous year. And then by signing that record level of contracts in the first quarter, we've added another $11 million of revenue to the 2017 financial year. So as at this date, as at the end of the first quarter, I suppose, we already know that we will exceed our revenue for the 2017 financial year. So we recorded just on just over $25 million worth of revenue from our clinical trials business in the 2016 financial year. We already know we're going to exceed that in the 2017 financial year. And to the extent we exceed that really will depend on how many more contracts we sign through quarters 2, 3 and 4. But at this stage, the business was looking really good and expecting another year of significant revenue growth into financial year 17.
Okay, that sounds very exciting. Brad, you've attracted a number of new people into the business. Do you want to tell us who these new appointments are and what their roles are?
Yeah, so one of the great things that's come about as our business has grown and as we're starting to expand our customer base, and also as to be honest, as a result of the share price appreciation, we've been able to attract a much higher caliber of candidates into the business. We've been thinking for some time about strengthening our management team, and we made the decision earlier in the year to hire a COO, a Chief Operating Officer, really a 2IC, second in charge for me. And we've appointed a gentleman by the name of George Honeywell. George comes out of Parexel. Parexel is one of the largest contract research organisations or pharma services companies in the world. He was most recently in the role of Corporate VP of Clinical Research. So in there, really senior executive in a business that's generating $1.4 billion of revenue and over 10,000 employees. Before then, he previously oversaw all of Parexel's mergers and acquisition work, working closely with their CEO and CFO and obviously the business unit presidents. And prior to that, he co-founded Parexel's informatics business, and he was a member of that executive team that spun out that business out of Parexel, ran it independently for 5 years and then sold it back into Parexel. So he's got really good experience in growing teams, specifically in this clinical trial services market, so obviously direct correlation with what we're doing. He's just completed his 12-month non-compete and has joined Cogstate only in the last week as our COO. So really looking for him to, for assistance as we seek to grow this business, and the clinical trials business extensively from where we are now. And he had a number of other opportunities in front of him, including CEO of a VC-backed pharma services company, and he chose Cogstate because of the significant revenue and growth potential that he saw within the business. Really smart guy, educated at Harvard and an MBA from Sloan School of Management and MIT. So, really smart guy, lives in Boston, and will work with our US team in the New Haven office there. The other person we've added is a guy by the name of Frank Cheng. Frank will be our president of healthcare. The healthcare business is looking at the potential of applying Cogstate technology in a primary care medicine market, or our general practitioner market. The idea of how does your GP measure cognition when you go in there for whatever reason. Frank brings, again, really good experience to the role, over 22 years experience in diagnostic and devices, taken and multiple devices through regulatory clearance and reimbursement in not just the US, but also EU, Canada, China, and Japan. So it really brings to Cogstate a level of experience of commercialising a medical device that up until now didn't exist within our management team. He's Chinese by birth, but has spent most of his working life in the US, has an MBA from Vanderbilt University. He started at Roche Diagnostics, where he was the VP of Global Business Development, and also worked at GE Healthcare. So, really good experience in that device market, and we're looking for him to help guide our decision making as we start thinking about entering that healthcare market with our technology.
You've also inked a deal with a company called Clinical Inc. Do you want to tell us what that involves?
Yeah, so Clinical Inc. Are a really natural partner for us. They have a technology solution that can be used in clinical trials. Essentially what they have is a computer tablet, like an iPad type device, that enables the paper and pencil tests that are often used in clinical trials to be turned into an electronic form. So what they do is program those forms onto the device, and they can be it's just a handwritten type exercise as it would be on paper using a stylus, a computer stylus rather than a pen, but allows all the flexibility that you get from a paper-based assessment, but all the advantages of electronic data capture. And how we're working with Clinical Link is we're utilising their technology to support our rater training services. So this is the type part of our business where we support not only our computerised tests, but also the administration of paper-based cognitive assessments. And what we bring to that partnership is the science and the expertise in relation to the assessment of cognition in clinical trials, and what they're bringing is the technology piece. So it's a really good partnership in that, you know, each of us has something that the other doesn't, and the combination of the offering you know, is very clear, and there's no competition between either Clinical Link or Cogstate.
Okay, Brad, you've provided some guidance to the market just in terms of your financials. Do you want to run us through what we can expect for FY17?
Yeah, so look, I mean, obviously a really strong year, you know, driven by our clinical trials business, and you know, and it is worth noting that, you know, that offering from Clinical Link has been well received, and we're expecting that to add to our growth profile. I'll note that we haven't sold anything yet in terms of the combined offering between Cogstate and Clinical Link. It's still, as you say, freshly minted, but we do have 7 proposals outstanding at the moment with, you know, that are collectively worth over $62 million. So there's a lot of interest for that. There's a lot of interest for our core services as well within the clinical trials business. So we're expecting to continue that growth, and part of bringing George onto the team is to really push that growth profile going forward. So we're expecting, you know, continued strong growth from our clinical trials business. We've provided guidance at in relation to the first half of the business that will be profitable, you know, and really largely based on that exceptional first quarter result. Second quarter still, you know, is also looking strong, and so we're very confident of significant revenue growth in the first half and a good profit for the first half. As we start to look at the second half of the year, we've withheld guidance on that, and part of that was waiting to see you know, how Lilly's drug went through its clinical trial and whether we needed to fast track you know, any spending in relation to the development of the healthcare business. We'll probably pull back a little bit on that now and go at that a little bit more slowly given their negative results. So, you know, I think expecting, you know, a very strong 2017 financial year, but we'll provide the market with some, you know, with a more detailed forecast in relation to the full year results once we get through the half year, which will be released in late February.
Okay, Brad, well that sounds like a very exciting year for 2017 for Cogstate, so thank you very much for joining the Morgans Network today.
Thanks, Scott.